Welcome to the Cale Clark Show. This is a very special show. It's a super show because it is Super Bowl week, and we've got a great preview of Super Bowl 59 for you. I am joined right now by a great friend of the program. He is an NFL legend, 17-year quarterback in the National Football League, the MVP for the 2002 season, in which he led the Raiders to the Super Bowl. Currently an NFL analyst for Sirius XM NFL Radio, where he hosts Sirius XM Blitz with Bruce Murray. He also is involved with the 33rd team. Much more importantly, he's a husband to Shelley, father to his two wonderful daughters, Alexis and Danielle, a devoted Catholic and a friend of the Cale Clark Show. Rich Gannon is my guest. Welcome back to the program, Rich.
Cale, it's great to be with you, my friend. It's been too long. It's great to be down here in New Orleans, where we have what I think is going to be a great Super Bowl on Sunday. Two teams that deserve the right to represent the NFC and the AFC. There's been a lot of conversation. We've had a lot of interviews with the players and coaches all week, and so I'm anxious for Sunday night.
Yeah, it is going to be an interesting tell. And I got to ask you, Rich, are your loyalties divided a little bit? Of course, you're from Philadelphia high school legend, but of course, you also played for the Chiefs.
I have no horse in the race, honestly, Cale. I mean, I really root for players and coaches that I know, that I've worked with, that I have relationships with. So I have friends on both teams. I think that, if you're in the broadcast booth, all you really care for is a close game, right? You don't want it to be lopsided one way or another. But when you look at what happened just a couple of years ago, the score was 38-35. I think we'll have another high-scoring game. These are two really good offensive teams that are red hot right now. So I think it's going to be a great game. I think, Cale, if you want to, you could go for a walk on Super Bowl Sunday and just come back with 3 minutes to go. The game will still be relevant at that point.
I think you're right. I think it is going to be a tight game, and of course, as you mentioned, when these two teams played each other in Super Bowl 57, was also close. And obviously, the Chiefs and Andy Reid are going for the three-peat. I don't know if I can say that on air. Pat Riley might sue me, but I always say to people, Rich, you should have played in 3 straight Super Bowls. Of course, Tony Saragusa with that incredibly dirty hit in the AFC Championship game after the 2000 season. Of course, that's totally illegal now, and Tony's passed on. He may still be in purgatory for that hit. I don't know. And, of course, there's the Tuck Rule game the next year. And then, of course, you did get to the Super Bowl 37 against the Buccaneers. So how incredible, first of all, is it for a team? It's never been done before to actually make it to 3 Super Bowls in a row. Did you ever think this was possible?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things that really impressed me about this Kansas City team. I think first and foremost, their ability to handle success. It's really hard in the National Football League. I think, just week to week. I mean, I've been on teams that have won 3 or 4 in a row, and guys start becoming very comfortable. Guys start reading the press clippings and start feeling like they're better than they are, and they let their guard down a little bit. Next thing you know, you get thumped by somebody. And I think the Chiefs, to me, their ability to handle success year in and year out, week in and week out, really day in and day out, every day they walk into the facility to go out and prepare and play at such a high level. I think the other thing that's so impressive is, they've had so many one-score games, right? So every game that they play this year, it comes down to a big play in the fourth quarter. I don't think there's a team in football that's as comfortable as the Chiefs are with a game on the line, because that's the world that they live in. Whether it's, blocking a kick against the Broncos, the last play of the game, whether it's, having to come from behind on the road against the Carolina Panthers. I mean, it really doesn't matter. This team has handled adversity well, has been able to handle success, and is a very mentally tough football team.
Yeah, absolutely. And they are tough. And just being in those situations does give you a lot of comfort when things go down to the wire. They've been there before. They know what to do. They know how to handle that emotionally. What about if they are able to pull this off, if they do win 3 in a row, where do you think that leaves Coach Andy Reid and Mahomes also in the conversation in terms of GOAT status? Would this be, in your opinion, the greatest team of all time if they're able to pull it off?
I'm never comfortable with that, because I think you look at some of those Patriot teams that Belichick and Brady were a part of, and it's not just Bill, or it's not just Tom. It's all the great players that played on those teams. I think we'd be doing a disservice to the Chiefs if we just focus on just 2 people. There's a lot of great people in that organization that I know very well, and then Steve Spagnuolo is one of them, the defensive coordinator. He's been phenomenal. That defense has been really good. So But I think it's pretty amazing. It's never been done before to win three in a row. I think the closest thing we've had is the Buffalo Bills going to four straight and losing all of them.
Yeah,
That was a dominant
yeah.
team that played some really good teams in the NFC. So, I do know this. If they win the Super Bowl on Sunday and Patrick Mahomes is handed the Super Bowl MVP trophy before he picks up that Lombardi trophy or before he picks up that MVP trophy, he'll turn to Travis Kelce and say, let's do this again. It's exactly what he did last year.
That's
Prior to
exactly what he
picking up the
did
Super
last
Bowl
year.
last year, he said, let's go for a three-peat.
Yeah, there's no question they're gonna push for four if they pull it off. I wouldn't be shocked if Mahomes said that as well. And you just mentioned Steve Spagnuolo, obviously a brilliant defensive coordinator for the Chiefs. And by the way, I know that you did, and I thank you for this, Rich. You know I'm a Bills fan. You did pick the Bills to beat the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, and Spags was one reason why they didn't get it done. Obviously, with that surprise blitz. And I saw that you reposted on Twitter Ryan Fitzpatrick's little comment. There was an analyst. I'm not going to name him. Kind of an armchair quarterback, if you will, who said, "Oh, why didn't Allen just throw the orbit route to Khalil Shakir on that blitz?" It's not that simple when it's coming at you 100 miles an hour, is it?
No, it's not. And I guess the one thing that's so disappointing about all that, Cale, is that, we spend so much time during the week really studying our opponent, right? Looking at who the
Mm-hmm.
defensive coordinator is, what his fastball is, what their tendencies are. And anybody watching that game would have told you that in a critical, got to have it situation, Steve Spagnuolo is going to bring some form of pressure. I just don't think the Bills were ready for it, and that was a bit of a shock. I don't think Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator for the Bills, had his best day. But I
No.
think that team was so close. And I think you look at all the
Yeah.
great players, starting with the quarterback, Josh Allen, who I know you're a big fan of.
Yeah.
He's a unique player at that position. I think his toughness, I think he has so many of the qualities and intangibles you love at that position. I think that's what makes that matchup between the Bills and Chiefs so enjoyable and entertaining. I think you have two of the greatest quarterbacks in the NFL,
Yeah.
and they have a lot of the same characteristics and qualities: tough, physically, mentally, always prepared, great teammates, great leaders, team before self. I mean, that's what makes this game so great and so enjoyable for the fans.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of agree with you that Joe Brady did. It was obviously a hot name in the head coaching search commodity this year. I don't think he had a great game calling plays either. I mean, how many times can you run the tush push? And by the way, I'd like to see that play banned. I don't know how you feel about that, Rich.
I talked to Jalen Hurts the other day. He doesn't want to see it banned.
Of
It's not an
course
easy
not.
play. The one thing I would say, Cale, it's not an easy. You don't practice it. Like people say, well, you practice it. You can't practice it. You don't have a quarterback that's making $30 million, and we're just going to get him in a big scrum with defensive players flying all around. It's not something you practice. The Eagles get a lot of practice at it because they run it so much, right? But
Yeah,
there's some real strategy behind it. And you look at Jalen Hurts. He's 6'1". He's about 220
yeah,
pounds, and he squats 650 pounds. He has got a big trunk. His lower half of his body is powerful. He gets low, and he's the best at it. And it's I don't know. I doubt the NFL will ban it because I think it's just been the rules of football. But I think pushing and we're getting to the point now where we're grabbing players and pushing them and
yeah.
pulling them over the line to game. So maybe the NFL will do something about that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what's your take too? And I don't think this is why the Bills lost the game. I kind of feel like the Chiefs outcoached them. I don't know what you think, Rich, but I feel like number one, they had a couple injuries, serious injuries on the back end. Taylor Rapp was out. Benford got the concussion in the game, and Kyrie Elam came in and obviously didn't play well. I feel like defensively they didn't hold up their end of the bargain. But also Andy Reid's play calling. I mean, pulling out stuff that you know players had never seen before. Formations, offensive formations. Mahomes is running out. They hadn't seen all year. Talk to me about the genius of Andy Reid as coach, and do you think that he actually was it a coaching job that enabled him to get that win over the
Well, I think if
Bills?
you're honest with yourself, and I think Sean McDermott's a terrific head coach, Cale. I think they go back and look at it. It's not just the players. I think you have to look at what we did defensively with Bobby Babich and Sean McDermott on that side of the ball. I think Joe Brady, you mentioned some of the quarterback sneaks that they ran over and over again. I think they were stopped on three of them.
Yeah,
I think James Cook was running hot, and the fact that he didn't
yeah.
touch the ball more late in the game was a shocker to me.
Me too.
So I think there's some things that they look at and say, hey, look, let's be pretty transparent here internally with the staff and say we can be better in those situations. As for Andy Reid, I don't think Andy Reid gets enough credit for the job he does as the play caller. Forget the
Hmm.
fact that he's a great head coach, a great leader, always has his team prepared. But I think he's one of the best play callers in the NFL. And I think the thing he does so well with Patrick Mahomes, Tom Moore, the great assistant coach in the NFL for the better part of 5 decades, Coach Peyton Manning. I remember doing games with CBS and visiting with Tom, and Tom would always say, when you have a thoroughbred like Peyton Manning, the last thing you want to do is pull those reins and hold them back. I think that's what Andy does a great job of with Patrick. He lets them run. Like if you got a thoroughbred, they got to let them run. They can be wild at times, but that's their nature. I think you don't want to restrict someone like Patrick Mahomes. His creativity, his ingenuity, his ability to create, manufacture offense, extend plays, some of the unscripted offense. That's what he's so good at.
Yeah.
I think Andy does a really good job trying not to rein him in, but allow him to go out there and use his skill set to take advantage of some of the weaknesses from a defensive perspective.
Yeah, I agree with that, and it's so fortuitous that Mahomes did land in Kansas City with Reid. What a great situation, obviously, as a quarterback, and you know this, having played for several organizations, where you end up and who's coaching you, the system, the scheme that you're in, obviously determines a lot of your success in the NFL. Obviously, you had such great, uh, you were incredible with the West Coast offense in Oakland. And when you look at these rookie quarterbacks that came out this past season, how shocked were you that Jaden Daniels played as well as he did for the Commanders, getting them to the NFC Championship game?
Well, I was impressed with a lot of them. It just wasn't Jaden
Yeah.
Daniels. I think even Drake May in New England with the
Yep.
bad offensive line, the worst receiving crew in football, and I think you look at Bo Nix's success that he had in
Yep.
Denver, getting them to the postseason. So I think there's a lot of young quarterbacks out there that really took advantage of the opportunities this year, but none more so than Jaden Daniels. I mean, I think Cale, what's so impressive to me about Jaden Daniels was just his pride. I mean, his poise
Mm.
and his confidence and his swagger. I mean, he never became unraveled. It act like he didn't act, or play like a rookie quarterback, and that's
No.
unusual. He handled the pressure really well. He made a lot of big plays. He wound up leading the National Football League in terms of rookie quarterbacks and rushing. Set a rookie rushing record for quarterbacks. Also set a rookie completion percentage. He was at 70% most of the season. He finished at 69%.
It's
I'm
unbelievable.
just so impressed with the body of work, and the bigger the game, the better he played. And the great thing about Jaden is he looks like he's having fun doing it. So I think the future is bright. Think about the turnaround in Washington, Cale, in one season.
Yeah, it's
This was
unreal.
one of the worst run franchises in professional sports. And in one year, you got a new owner that comes in, a new general manager, a new head coach, and a rookie quarterback, and you win 14 games. Pretty impressive.
That is incredibly impressive, and fast turnarounds can happen in the NFL, obviously with the right personnel in key areas and coaching and scheme as well. And when you look at Chicago, talk about another rookie quarterback, Caleb Williams, who was the number one selection, obviously, and has a lot of skill. I watched almost all the Bears games this year, and they had a lot of holes. He didn't exactly. It's kind of interesting because the Hail Mary game against Washington. I mean, I feel like Washington was, at the end of the day, they turned out to be what people thought the Bears were going to be this year, maybe. And that game was such a turning point for both of those franchises. Obviously, now Ben Johnson coming in as the coach of the Bears, and you saw his work as offensive coordinator in Detroit. How do you see those two meshing, and what are your thoughts on Caleb? I know you were never a big fan of Justin Fields, but now that Caleb's there, how do you see his fit? What do you think of him as a quarterback, and how they're going to work together with Ben?
Okay, I think the best thing that Caleb Williams did this year was play all 17 games. And that's not
Hmm.
easy for someone who sacked more than any quarterback in football. So he showed some real toughness, some real resolve, the ability to overcome adversity, to hang in there, to take a beating, and really to, I think, stand up and be accountable, not only for his play, but for his team's play. And I think it was a disappointing season for the Bears. There's no question about it. Anytime you fire a coach and have an interim come in and then replace the coordinator, it's
Yeah.
not a good situation trying to develop a young quarterback. I think they bring in Ben Johnson. Obviously, he's had success as a coordinator. Now we're going to find out the kind of success he can have leading the entire group of 53 men
Yeah.
on both sides of the ball, plus the kicking game. And they got a lot of work because that's, I think, one of the most competitive divisions in football. You look at Detroit, you look at what happened there this season. They won 15 regular season games. You look at the Minnesota Vikings. I think they won 13 or 14. Of course, the Green Bay Packers, I think, won 12 games. So
Yeah.
they got a lot of work to do, to make up some ground in what I think is an incredibly competitive NFC North division. But I think Chicago, the first thing you got to do is do what they did in Detroit, address the offensive line. The Lions have one of the best offensive lines in football. Jared Goff, not the most mobile of quarterbacks, but you got a great offensive line in front of a quarterback, and good things can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, the NFC is an incredibly tough division. It's like running the gauntlet. And so is the AFC West, of course. The Raiders bring in Pete Carroll as head coach. There was a lot of talk that it turned out to be a smokescreen. I saw a couple of interviews with Ben Johnson's agent in which he said he kind of let that rumor ride. He didn't try to squash it because it's good for leverage, but there was some talk that he might go to the Raiders. And I know Tom Brady, obviously minority owner of the Raiders, did have some conversations with Ben Johnson's camp, but ultimately he goes with Chicago, and you can't really blame him for the situation that they have with all that cap money with Caleb. He obviously went there for the quarterback. Now, Pete Carroll, after a hiatus, after having coached Seattle for so many years, he comes back into the NFL with the Raiders. What do you think of that hire? What's your take on it?
Well, let me just say this. We've had 37 different coaches get fired in the last 5 seasons in the NFL. If you can imagine that, Cale. We only have 32 teams. We fired 37 of them in 5 years.
Wow.
The Raiders have had 9 different head coaches since 2011, and as has the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's the most in the NFL. So 9 head coaches in since 2011. So what does that tell you? They've had so much turnover at the most important position in the NFL. So Pete comes in, and I think the most important thing is you got to be able to create a culture and an environment. You have to find stability within your organization. You can't keep firing the head coach. You can't keep firing the play caller. You can't keep replacing the quarterback. They need some stability there, especially in a division that has Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, that has Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh, that now has Sean Payton and Bo Nix. So, I think bringing in Pete makes some sense. Pete and I worked together way back when in Minnesota, in the late 80s when Pete was our secondary coach with the Vikings. Got great respect for his body of work. Pete's got a lot of energy at 73. He's been there. He's done it. He's had success at every level of organizations as an assistant coach, as a coordinator, as a head coach. He's been a head coach on 4 different teams. Won a national championship at USC. He's won a Super Bowl with the Seattle Seahawks. So I'm excited that Pete brings experience. He'll put together a great staff. That's already happening. He's hired some great coaches. He just brought in Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator. He retained Patrick Graham as the defensive coordinator. He was highly sought after. So, but you know what? You can get all these great coaches, but you don't have a quarterback. This is a bad business. And I say it all the time. You're better off selling life insurance. This is not the business for. That's how coaches get fired. So we'll see if they can get the quarterback situation right. Tom Brady is going to be involved, and I think that's a good thing. Tom obviously has had a lot of success in the NFL, but we'll see how it shakes out in terms of finding that quarterback.
Do you think they're going to address the position through the draft, or are they going to go the free agency route, do you think?
I don't think it's a great year for the draft, and I think where the Raiders are picking, I think there's some teams in front of them that need help at the quarterback position. I think you have to look at every option available. I think free agency is one of those options. I think there's a couple quarterbacks that would be of interest. I think Sam Darnold kind of resurrected his career with the Minnesota Vikings this year. I think another guy to keep an eye on is Daniel Jones, who was with the Giants, who went who had to overcome a lot of adversity in that building. Had a bad offensive line. They didn't have a lot of help at once they got rid of Saquon Barkley. Even the tight end position wasn't great. The wide receiver position wasn't great before they got Neighbors, and so I'd keep an eye on Daniel Jones as well. I think this quarterback, he's a quarterback that's still young. I think he's 27 years old and has a lot of upside in the NFL.
Yeah, and I kind of wondered whether he wanted to go to Minnesota to kind of reset his career a little bit, somewhat like what Sam Darnold did, or whether this is sort of a waypoint. It's a good question. I guess it depends on. It seems like the Vikings want to bring back J.J. McCarthy and just kind of go all in on him. I don't think Sam Darnold helped his case. Obviously, the last game of the regular season against Detroit in the playoff game, he'll probably go elsewhere. He's got to carry a huge monetary hit. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what happens with Daniel Jones going forward as well. And you mentioned Saquon just a moment ago. And obviously he is, I think this is maybe the greatest revenge tour I've ever seen in professional sports. The Giants let him go. he goes to a divisional rival and just absolutely tears it up. How much of a? I mean, this is a pretty different Philadelphia team than the last time they played the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. They've got Jalen Carter now as well, the two Jalen's, along with Hurts and Saquon. How hard is it to defend a player like him? How impressed are you with him? And ultimately, I'm going to ask you to make a pick on this game, Rich. Where do you see this going?
So I think the Eagles have the biggest, most physical, nasty offensive line in all of football. I think when you look across the board, George Mailata, you look at Lane Johnson, you look at Cam Jurgens. I mean, it's a great group. They're littered with Pro Bowl caliber players, and I think you put a back behind them in Saquon Barkley, who's I think maybe the toughest tackle in football. When you look at his production this year, Cale, 1,245 of those 2,000 yards came in the second half of
Wow.
games. And he's a type of back that can beat you up and wear you down. It's like a prize fight. He's one of those backs that gets stronger as the game goes on. He breaks a lot of tackles.
Mm.
That's an impressive number, but this is even a more impressive number. 2.64 yards. So 2.64 yards before contact. That's the number this season. So he usually gets about 2.64 yards before anyone gets a hand on him. You take a back that's that powerful, no wonder he's averaging, 5 yards a carry. So he's a tough back. This is a great running team. It's the best running team in football right now. Jalen Hurts is a part of that. And this is going to be a real challenge for the Kansas City Chiefs. That being said, I talked about this game coming down to a kick at the end. It's a game that's going to come down to, I think, the last possession. And for me, it's simply this. Who do you trust more with their ball in their hands with under 2 minutes? No one better in football than Patrick Mahomes. I have to go with the Chiefs.
And the other thing, too, is we always have to remember for Andy Reid, whenever he plays against Philadelphia, I mean, it is personal for him at some level, even though he may not ever admit that.
There's no question. I mean, look, Jeffrey Lurie, the owner, fired him, and I think that Andy's gone to Kansas City and he's created a dynasty there. He's got this young quarterback that's not young anymore, but he's still relatively young in football years and probably going to play another 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And if you're Andy Reid, why would you walk away when you're having so much fun and winning so many games?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's no reason to, especially considering they might be going for 4. We'll see what happens on Sunday. Now, producer Lucas wanted to jump. He had a question for you, Rich. Now, he's a big Dolphins fan. We'll have to forgive him for that. But he had a question for you about Tua and where the Dolphins should go.
So, yeah, just as a Dolphins fan, I love Tua. I think he's very talented. I think he's great inside the locker room. I like him a lot. I think he works well with Mike McDaniel's offense. However, I just have to wonder about the Dolphins' future with him as their franchise quarterback when he's played only one full season over the last 3 seasons. What are your thoughts on their future and Tua's role?
Yeah, Lucas, when they're all healthy and they're all on the field together, it's a really good offense, right? We looked at them last year. They're one of the most explosive offenses in football. It's one of the fastest offenses in football. In fact, we had Raheem Mostert on our show yesterday. When you look at that group, I mean, with Waddle and Hill and just the speed that they have, Achane. But the problem has been is they haven't been on the field always together. And I think you look at the quarterback and he's missed a lot of games, right? So you're concerned about the concussions, multiple concussions. He's not the biggest quarterback, and so everyone wants to say, well, you're not the only one, and you're not the only city where people say, well, what's our other options at quarterback? And I would tell you that until you find someone better or cheaper. It's hard to replace that guy, and I think you got to roll the dice another year with him and see, how much better he can get in Mike's system. But when they've been healthy, they've been really good. I think he's been good, but they've got to continue to address the offensive line. They got to continue to keep him upright. He's got to do a better job protecting himself and not taking the unnecessary hits. But if you're the Dolphins, it'd be foolish not to always look at trying to improve that quarterback position. You look at the Green Bay Packers. When they had Brett Favre, they went out and got Aaron Rodgers. When they had Aaron Rodgers, they went out and got Jordan Love. And even when they have Jordan Love, you constantly are going out, even if it's not a first round pick. Finding a quarterback in the 3rd round, or the 4th round that you think has some upside that can be developed. They did that with Matt Hasselbeck and other quarterbacks, Mark Brunell over the years. You have to constantly be looking at ways to improve that quarterback room on your football team.
You're listening to the Cale
Yeah.
Clark Show. My guest is Rich Gannon, NFL MVP and commentator analyst for Sirius XM NFL coverage. Rich, if you put yourself into his shoes after all these concussions, with the risk obviously of CTE, if you were him, would you have stepped away?
I don't, that's a hard question to answer because I don't have all the information in front of me in terms of, what the doctor said and what the diagnosis was and what what his particulars were in terms of the health and safety part of it. I think, he's a young guy. I think that some of those questions, he's married, he's got children. So, that you take that in consideration. You have to have those conversations with your wife, but I don't know. It's hard for me to say what I would do. If I'd probably would want to. These players want to play, guys. They don't want to. I'd probably still play. I know how crazy that sounds, but we're pretty passionate about our sport.
Yeah, I get it. And Rich, this is kind of a counterfactual question because you're a parent of daughters, just like me. If you had a son, would you have any pause about letting him play with what we know now about CTE?
No, not at all. I think, the NFL is really pushing flag football. I would also say that, the concussions and some of the significant injuries are more prevalent in the NFL or even in college football, not so much in high school or even youth football. And so I think you have to factor that into it. But I think we've gotten better in terms of teaching the game, player safety. We're no longer putting players back in games who've been concussed. So, no, as a parent, if I had children that are young boys, I'd certainly let them play.
Absolutely. Well, Rich, I know you got to get down to Radio Row. It looks like you're on the move. And, hey, I really appreciate you taking the time. And thanks, Rich, and enjoy the game on Sunday.
Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
You got it. There's Rich Gannon if you need him. And you can find him on Twitter at RichGannon12. You can also, of course, listen to him along with Bruce Murray on Sirius XM NFL coverage. Thank you so much, Rich. And Lucas, man, we've got a great Super Bowl, and Rich just kind of set it up for us there. What's your take? Who are you going to go with on Super Bowl Sunday? Chiefs? Or are you going to go with Philly?
You know what? I'd like Philadelphia, but I think Rich's points are right. This is a team that knows how to win, that has a lot of experience. I think as much as I would like to see the Eagles win, I think the Chiefs are going to find a way to pull it out in the end. So I'm going to go with the Chiefs.
Going to go with the Chiefs. Okay, well, I'm going Philly. I'm going Philly this time. I think they're just so much improved from the last time they played the Chiefs. I just feel like their defense is the number one defense in the NFL. Saquon just gives them, as Rich said, an edge that they didn't have in the running game, which was already with that offensive line, and Hurts kind of also being a dual threat. I just think that they're playing really, really well. They learned from their experience last time. They know what it's like to be in the big game under the lights and all the distractions that come with the Super Bowl as well at the long halftime show. It's an adjustment for players. It's not like any other game. And I'm sure Rich would testify to that as well. So I'm going to go Philly this time. And I also kind of want a little revenge on the Chiefs for not upsetting, but I mean, you can't really say it's an upset whenever the Chiefs win, but for beating the Bills. Oh, still hurts the AFC Championship game. What a classic rivalry that is. But it should be a lot of fun as we watch the Super Bowl together. Well, for producer Lucas Holt, I want to thank my guest, Rich Gannon, today on the Cale Clark Show. Enjoy the game, everybody, and we'll be back next week with another episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. Share it with a friend, and sign up for my email newsletter. I'll keep you informed about the latest programs, guests, and all the great stuff we've got coming up for you on the Cale Clark Show. Just go to caleclark.com, C-A-L-E, Clark with an E.com. And you can, of course, sign up for the email list there. It'll show you what to do. And we're so glad to have you part of the Cale Clark Show family. So good to be with you. Signing off, guys. Take care and God bless.